I'm now going to be talking about how to ply yarns together using your drop spindle. So we have already done videos on getting started, on setting up, on park and draft spinning, and on regular spinning on the fly. And now I want to talk about what we do with the singles, so that's the single strand of yarn that we have just spun on our drop spindle, to create a plied yarn, which is going to be what most of your commercial yarns are. So if I do a close-up here of this commercial yarn, you'll see the multiple strands twisted up against each other. And that is plying yarn, is twisting multiple strands together. So the first thing that we need to do is get the yarn off of our drop spindle to be able to ply with it. There are lots of fancy gizmos that you can get, but you don't actually need any of them, especially when you're just starting off and you're not going to be having tons of yarn. So I just started winding this into a little ball. You can just let your spindle spin on the table. You can put it in a bowl. You can kind of hold it still or hold it in your hand to spin it around. You can poke holes in a shoebox and slide it in so that it rotates freely and is easy to do that way. But especially when you're first starting off, I think it's good to try out the skill and see if you like it before you invest in a lot of tools that you may or may not find that you like or need. So you pull all of your yarn off there. You will notice when you get to the end, you remember how we attached to our leader. So the yarn that I spun was green. The leader that I used was purple. A lot of the times you can kind of just pull and you'll get those to pull apart cleanly. So you can see you've got only the green on one side and only the purple on the other side. Or you can use a pair of scissors and cut them apart if you want to. So you can just wind that all up onto your little ball. And especially when you're doing a little bit thicker yarn and not tons of yardage, this is going to work just fine for you. So now we've got our spindle that just has our leader on it, which you will still want, that leader. And then we've got our yarn that we're going to ply together. In this case, because I want you to really be able to see how the two plies are working, I'm actually going to use this blue commercial yarn together with the green that I spun on my own. That way you can clearly see in the video how these two yarns are working together. You more standard would ply your own yarn together with itself. And so when you're winding, you can wind into two different balls. Obviously you would normally have a little bit more on your spindle than the tiny amount that I've got here. So you are going to take your two yarns that you want to ply together, and you don't have to ply two of the same yarns. You can ply your hand spun with a commercial yarn. You can ply two commercial yarns together. You can do a multiply. You can do a 3 plies all together, all 3 different colors, all 3 the same color, all 3 different fibers. Really, the sky's the limit in terms of plying yarns together. The only rule for plying 2 yarns together is they must have twist going the same direction. So when we were spinning our singles about how we always wanted our drop spindle to be rotating the same way, and traditionally that was going to be a clockwise direction, but we needed to always spin our singles in the same direction. That is because you can only ply singles together that were spun the same way. So my single was spun in the clockwise direction, and then this commercial yarn was spun in the clockwise direction. So these two can be twisted together. And if you're wondering kind of how you tell if you're looking at a commercial yarn, you are going to want to see. So again, if I put this commercial yarn right up close to you, I chose this commercial yarn because it does have one ply that's a slightly different color. So you'll see the direction that twist goes. You may hear people talk about Z direction and S direction. So what that means is if you think about the letter Z and the letter S, that crossbar in the middle of those letters leans one way or leans the other way. So if you look at your yarn, you want to see which direction. Do my crossbars go this way or do my crossbars go that way? And you just want to make sure that your crossbars on your yarn is going the same direction as the yarn that you're going to be plying it together with. If they both of those go the same way, you can ply them together. If they don't, you need to find a different yarn because those will not ply together. It creates two strands next to each other. It does not create a plied yarn. So once you are sure that your yarns are twisted the same direction as each other, you are just going to hold the two yarns that you want to ply. You're going to hold them next to each other. You're going to overlap those with your leader on your drop spindle here. And just like we did when we were getting started, you are going to overlap those and you're going to give your drop spindle a twist. When you're plying, you need to twist the opposite direction that you twisted when you were spinning the singles on their own. The opposite direction. So if you did the most traditional twisting your singles clockwise, you want to twist your plies counterclockwise. And it always takes me a minute because I spin so many more of the singles than I do plying. My hand just wants to go the single spinning direction with my drop spindle. So you want to go the plying direction. And again, I talked in a previous video, some people choose to put a little piece of tape and draw an arrow so they know which way to go. Your piece of tape could have an arrow that goes one way that says singles and the arrow that goes the other way that says plying as an added reminder. So once we've twisted those on there, you will see how now my leader is connected to these yarns that I've got twisting together, and that's exactly what you want. And from here on out, it's going to be just like spinning, except you don't have to do any drafting. And so you are simply going to, again, make sure that you are spinning in the opposite direction that you did your singles. So for me, that's counterclockwise. You are just going to drop your spindle, let it start spinning, and let those two strands ply together. So you've got your two strands, you're just letting the twist travel between those two strands. And that is going to be how you put your plies together. Now theoretically, you want to hold your plied yarns apart from each other. So you want to have, just like you see here in my hands, you want to have one ball of your plies held in kind of, I generally use between my fingers like this. So I've got one ply that comes between these two fingers and one ply that comes between two other fingers. That way they're not, if you hold them both together, what tends to happen, so if you're not separating them in any way, with this hand here, I've just got my two different plies up against each other. What tends to happen, and you can see it here, is that green strand has a lot more slack in it as I'm going through. And so what will tend to happen is you'll get one strand that is pulled tighter than the other strand if you just pull them apart this way. Things just aren't as even as if you keep them separated between two fingers like this to do your plying. And the whole time I was talking, my spindle was not spinning. It had come unconnected and fallen down. So you do need to keep an eye on that just a little bit. You want to make sure that everything is still connected all together. As you're letting your spindle go, be aware you've only got a certain amount of time before that's going to drop down. So I'm letting it spin. It's twisting that ply together, and I'm doing my plying. So twisting, doing the ply, and creating that yarn. And again, once you've got that comfortable arm's length of plied yarn, you are going to unhook from the top of the spindle and wind it on down below. And then you're ready to do some more of your plying. Plying goes much faster than spinning does, because you don't have to do any drafting. And also because the yarn that you're creating is twice as thick, as it's two strands held together. I would recommend, especially if you're struggling with drafting, that's something that creates a challenge for a lot of people. If you're really struggling with the drafting and you just want to practice doing the spinning of the spindle and managing your the yarn and how to hold everything all together, plying one ball of commercial yarn together with itself, so you kind of pull one in from each side, or have two skeins, or wind it into two different balls. Just doing a whole spindle full of plying of commercial yarn, so not something that you've made, but yarn that you have in your stash that maybe you don't want for anything else, or that you want to be thicker, is going to give you a great chance to practice a lot of the skills that have to do with spinning without adding that element of drafting in. So that is another option for you, if you want some more practice with spinning or with drafting without actually having to create all of your own singles to do it.